someone just said something about you, not to you, about you, in a room or a conversation or an exchange that you were not present for and that you did not know was happening while it was happening, and that has now produced a reaction. In the people who heard it, that can only be described as losing their mind. In the specific and destabilizing form of people who received information about you that they were not expecting, in the form it arrived in, and that has rearranged something in how they understand the situation and who you are in it and what that means for the specific people who are now losing their minds over what was just admitted in the conversation you were not in, but that was entirely about you. I need you to stay with me through every word of this, because what I am about to describe is happening right now, in real time, in the field around your situation, and the knowing of it changes everything about how you understand where you actually stand in the specific and significant situation that this reading is about. Welcome, my beautiful soul, and let me tell you what just happened. But first, because I will not skip past you, to get to the drama faster, even when the drama is significant and moving quickly and producing the specific and destabilizing reactions that this reading is describing. I feel something in your energy right now that I want to name before anything else, because it is sitting underneath everything else in the quiet and often unexamined form of something that has been present for a while without being fully acknowledged even by you, in the honest and interior form of your own awareness of what you are carrying. There is a specific kind of discomfort that comes from knowing that people have been talking about you in spaces you are not in, and not knowing exactly what is being said, or in what form, or with what intent behind the saying of it, in the rooms and conversations that have been happening without your presence or participation, but with your name and your situation as the central content of the conversation. You have felt this in the intuitive and body-based form of someone who senses things before the evidence of the sensing arrives, in the visible and confirmable dimension of something that has been read correctly before the reading could be confirmed by the evidence that was not yet available to the person doing the reading in the intuitive and body-based form, that it was being done in, you felt that people were talking and you were right. You are always right about that specific feeling in the particular and reliable way that your intuition is always right about that specific feeling. When it arrives in the body-based form of something that does not need the evidence yet, because the feeling itself is the evidence that something is happening in the rooms you are not in, about the situation you are in, that involves your name being spoken in ways you were not yet aware of, but that your body already knew about before your mind could confirm the knowing. Now let me tell you what was said. In the approximate and energy-based form that this kind of reading produces, rather than the exact word for word form, that only the people who were in the room can access in the direct and literal way of having been present for the conversation that produced the losing of minds that this reading is describing. What was admitted about you was something the person admitting it had been holding for a significant period in the interior and private and carefully contained form of someone who understood that the admission would change things in the specific and irreversible way, that certain admissions always change things. When they are finally made, after the period of the not making, during which the thing being admitted was accumulating in the interior of the person holding it, without being released into the visible and shared space where it could produce its effects on the people who would receive it. When it was finally admitted, the admission was about your value, specifically and significantly, in the form of someone saying out loud for the first time in the specific and direct way that out loud and for the first time always carries when it has been not out loud and not for the first time. For the full period of the holding that preceded the admission, they said what you are worth in the specific and naming form of someone who has been watching you, in the careful and sustained form of observation that accumulates understanding over time, rather than in the casual and surface form of someone who has encountered you without the sustained attention. That produces genuine understanding of what a person actually is and what they actually bring and what the specific and irreplaceable quality of their presence actually means for the situation they are in and the people they are in it with. This person has been watching with that attention for a long time, and what they admitted is the accumulated result of the long and sustained watching in the specific and direct form of something that can no longer be held in the interior and private form that it was being held in before the admission happened, in the room or conversation or exchange that you were not in, but that was entirely about you. Now the losing of minds, because that is the part the title is pointing toward, and it deserves its full and specific description in the honest and vivid form of what actually happens in the people who receive information about someone that rearranges how they understand the situation involving that person and their own position in it. Here is what I know about the people losing their minds right now. And I want to say this as a specific and named thing, rather than the general and atmospheric thing that losing their minds can sound like when it is not grounded in the specific and honest description of what the losing actually looks like from the inside of the people experiencing it. Gossip only travels at speed when it contains something true. That is the specific and important thing to understand. about what is happening in the people who receive the admission. The losing of minds is not a reaction to fiction. It is a reaction to something that landed as real in the resonant and undeniable form of something that the people receiving it could feel the truth of, even as they were receiving it in the first time of receiving it. Before they had processed it fully or decided what to do with the processing, the people losing their minds are losing them because the admission has rearranged something in the understanding they had of the situation involving you and their own position in it, in the specific and significant form of a rearrangement that is not comfortable. For the people whose understanding has been rearranged by the admission without their having chosen the rearrangement or prepared for it or had the opportunity to manage their response to the rearrangement before it arrived in the full and destabilizing form of the admission that produced it. Let me be more specific, because specific is what this reading is for. Spirit is showing me 3 distinct reactions in the people who received the admission and who are now losing their minds in their specific and individual forms of the losing. The first reaction is the person who already knew but had not heard it said out loud until now, and who is experiencing the specific and particular feeling of something confirmed in the explicit form that the intuitive form does not fully satisfy. In the way that hearing the thing said directly by the person who is saying it satisfies it when the hearing happens for the first time in the out loud and direct and specific way that the admission took when it was finally made. The second reaction is the person who did not know and who is now processing in real time the update that the admission requires of the understanding they had before the admission rearranged it into the new and more accurate form that the admission has produced by saying what was being held in the interior and private form that did not update the understanding of the people outside the interior until the admission brought it into the visible and shared space where it could update the understanding of the people who received it in the losing of mind's form that the update is producing as its natural and immediate effect on the people whose understanding has been updated by what was admitted. The third reaction is the most significant for you to know about because it is the one that involves the specific person whose reaction to the admission is going to produce something in the direction of you in the near and specific future that this reading is pointing toward as the natural next movement of someone whose understanding of the situation has been rearranged by the admission in a way that produces the losing of their mind in the most private and significant form of the 3 reactions. This person is losing their mind quietly in the interior and unexpressed form of someone who is processing something that they did not expect to receive in the form it arrived in, and that has produced in them the specific and compounding experience of realizing that they were wrong about something important in the particular and uncomfortable direction of having underestimated something rather than overestimated it, which is the more comfortable of the two directions in which it is possible to be wrong about something important. They underestimated you in the specific and now confronted form of someone who is receiving the evidence that the estimation they had of you was not as accurate as they believed it to be. When they were operating on it, before the admission updated it into something more accurate and less comfortable for the person who had the underestimation and who is now holding the update in the quiet and losing their mind form of someone who has just had their estimation corrected by information that they did not have before the admission provided it. I want to speak now about what this means for you specifically and practically in the forward moving form of what comes next. As the natural result of an admission having been made and minds having been lost and underestimations having been corrected in the real and now in motion field around your specific situation within the next 48 hours. Something moves in your direction from the field of the losing minds and the corrected underestimations and the admission that produced both in the specific and arriving form of contact or information or recognition that arrives as the downstream effect of the admission that has already happened. In the conversation you were not in, but that was entirely about you. 48 hours. Watch for it in whatever specific and personal form your life delivers it in. For the specific person reading this right now, now I want to address something that I feel underneath the story of what just happened in the rooms you were not in, and that deserves to be addressed directly rather than left in the unaddressed and sitting form that it has been in while the admission was being made and the minds were being lost and the underestimations were being corrected. In the field around your situation, there is a voice in you that says something like this: why does it take someone admitting something about me for people to see what was always there? Why was the seeing dependent on the admission rather than on the thing itself being visible enough to be seen without the admission? Producing the visibility that the thing itself should have been producing all along without the requiring of the admission, to make it visible enough to produce the losing of minds that the admission has produced by saying what should have been obvious without the saying, whew, I hear that voice and I want to answer it in the honest and direct form rather than the gentle and deflecting form. That would make the answer more comfortable, but less true. The voice is right. It should have been obvious. And it was not obvious. To the people who are now losing their minds over what was admitted because they were not paying the kind of attention that would have made it obvious before the admission made it impossible to miss, even for the people who were not paying attention, in the form that would have made the missing impossible. Before the admission, that is not your failure. It is theirs. The inability to see something clearly without being told what to see and where to look is not a deficiency in the thing being seen. It is a deficiency in the seeing of the people who needed the admission to see what was always there in the visible and present and unhidden form that it has always been in. For anyone paying the kind of attention that the seeing of it required, you were never invisible. You were simply in a room with people who were not looking in the direction that would have made you visible to them before the admission turned their heads in the right direction and produced the losing of minds that is now happening in the field around your situation as the specific and arriving effect of heads being turned by an admission that said, look here, this is what you have been missing in the direction you were not looking. Before the admission looked for you, I want to give you something before this reading closes, something specific in the permission form that I feel you need right now, in the particular and honest form of something you have been withholding from yourself while the admission was being made and the minds were being lost without your knowing. Permission to feel the satisfaction of this without the qualifying voice that says feeling satisfaction at other people's recognition of your value is something less than you should be above, or something that reveals a need for external validation that the truly secure person would not require in the form of minds being lost over what was admitted about them in the rooms they were not in. That qualifying voice is not wisdom, satisfaction at being seen accurately after a period of being seen inaccurately or not seen at all is not vanity. It is the natural and proportionate response of a person whose accurate seeing has finally arrived in the admission produced form of the minds losing themselves over what was just said about the person reading this, which is you. Feel the satisfaction in the full and unqualified form of someone who was always worth the losing of minds and who is now watching the losing happen in real time from the position of the person who the admission was about and who the minds are being lost over in the specific and arriving form of 48 hours and the contact or recognition or information that is moving in your direction right now. As this reading reaches you, you are protected and seen and admitted about in the rooms you were not in, that were entirely about you, and that are producing the losing of minds that this reading was always going to describe for the specific person who the admission was always going to be about, which is you right now. Reading this in the 48-hour window of something arriving in your direction from the field of everything, that has just shifted because someone said out loud what was always true.